Welcome back to the Hair of the Dog podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Begley, and today we're sharing another best of series, and this was originally episode 42, Secrets to Success with Kaylee Greer from Dog Breath Photography. This is an incredible conversation that I loved having, and I know a lot of you loved listening to it. So go ahead, kick back, have a listen for your first time, or even if it's the second time. I'm sure you're going to get something new out of it as well. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Hair of the Dog podcast. If you're a pet photographer ready to make more money and start living a life by your design, you've come to the right place. And now, your host, pet photographer, travel addict, chocolate martini connoisseur, Nicole Begley.
Hey everybody, Nicole here from Hair of the Dog, and I am here with one of my dear friends. I'm so excited to finally have her on the podcast, Kaylee Greer from Dog Breath Photography.
Sorry. I just yelled over you because I was so excited because I can see Nicole's little face on the video too, and it's so cute and adorable and lovely, and we're having the best time already before we even started recording. So I just got a little wild. But hi guys, it's Kaylee from Dog Breath Photography. I am so pumped to be here, Nicole. Thanks for having me.
Yay, of course, anytime. I'm so excited to have you here. And yeah, full disclosure, I'm supposed to be like in person in Boston this week, so I should have been able to see you in person and given you a hug.
Oh my God, imagine. The sacred hug. I just love to hug. I'm such a hugger, and with my clients too, I'm typically like really like huggy and in hands. I shouldn't say handsy,
weird.
But
I do the same. I'm always like, I get out of the car and it's like, hi.
Yeah. And it's so cold, right? It's like a weird, cold, awkward interaction. Like I was doing this thing for a while where I was going up to them and like kind of slowly meandering towards them and then like sort of doing the hug movement, like the fake them out with the arms just to see if they were going to react and maybe hug me back. But then Sam was like, Kaylee, that's creepy. You got to stop doing the the hug thing where you test out people's hugs because he's like, you're making people uncomfortable. So I stopped. It's really hard though. It's really hard. So I can't wait until the wheels go back onto the world and we can hug again.
I know, for real, among other things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm so excited to have you here. If any of you guys out there don't know Kaylee and Dog Breath, I don't know where you've been in the pet photography world because she is the queen, one of the starting, I don't even know what words. You have thrown this whole pet photography niche into the stratosphere. So very honored to have you here and to be, such an important part of my life.
Your kind words mean so much to me. Genuinely, truly. I try to keep like my head down and sort of always moving forward and not really like looking around at what else is sort of going on, whether it's in the photography industry or in the dog photography industry specifically. So I don't know. To hear you say those things, that means a lot to me. I don't really like ever check in with myself or like where I feel like I stand because it's a recipe for weird like mental health disaster.
Yeah, right.
I just want to keep making dog photos and looking ahead and try to do the best that I can to try to tell the stories of these dogs in the best way that I know how. So just to have you say those kind things means everything to me. Thank you. That's so sweet.
You're so welcome. Well, and I think that's part of the reason that you've been so successful is because, there's a lot of talk of, Simon Sinek, find your why. You started with your why, which was you love these dogs and you want to share their story and you want to create these images of the ways you see the dogs. And there is no one that I know that is more passionate about the work that they create than you. And I think that is just one of the main reasons that you've been as successful as you are.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. You humbled me. I'm going to keep you around for my ego. You're so sweet. But truly, it's funny. My whole life, I was sort of like a little bit of a lost soul. Like I knew I was a creative person. I knew that I had a voice that I wanted to use to do something to lift somebody up or to lift up something I believed in or was passionate about. But I was kind of like flip-flopping all over the place. Typically, like from the moment I was a child, it was very like, I'm distracted all the time, blinking lights, shiny pennies, never have a focus, never have like an idea about like what I want to be, who I want to be. And then in college, it was the same. I was like, oh, I think I'm going to major in this. Oh, no, I'll double major. No, I'm going to minor in this and major in this. And also, I want to write poetry and I want to write books. Oh, and I want to be in a band and I want to tour in my band. And like, I never had, and I was really like, I was really passionate about all those different things at all times, but I never focused. focused. I never put all of my heart into one single thing and kind of pushed forward on that one particular thing until dog photography. And that's when I was like, this is it. Everything clicked. Everything came together when I started to volunteer at the shelter. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, this is the thing. Like, I'm going to put everything else that I love and I still do as, you know, in my spare time or whatever, but kind of like, that's all well and good, but this is what I was put here on the earth for. Like, that's when I figured it out. It all became so clear when I got to the shelter. And so that's the first time I ever focused on anything. And actually, I read that book that you recommended. I think you read it. Yeah, I would think it was you. You always have these fancy books you recommend that are awesome. And it was, I think it's called Minimalism. And
it's Essentialism. Like,
Essentialism. That's what it is. Yeah. Essentialism.
Oh, look, it's right here. I can't reach it.
All right, hold on.
Boom.
Let me see.
Look.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. So see that scribble? There's like a black scribble of a mess on the cover. That's me, the mess, the scribble mess. And then it was like, you take the scribble and you straighten out the line and you make it perfect and straight and point it towards only one thing. And that's like when everything came kind of together for me. And so that weird, crazy, bananas, bonkers passion I had for all these other things, I sort of honed it and siphoned it all into dog photography. And I can say once I kind of made that discovery and had that clarity, that moment of like, aha, that everything kind of changed for me. And then things started to come together like pretty quickly. And I went on a wild roller coaster ride over the past, God, it's been almost 10 full years now. Photographing dogs.
I was going to ask when you started photographing for the shelter.
Yeah, 2010. Crazy.
Wow,
2010. Yeah. So what in the world? This is wild. Oh my gosh, I'm getting older every day. Holy mackerel. I looked in the mirror the other day and I was like, oh, wrinkle? Is that a wrinkle? I can't even imagine a wrinkle. I was so upset. So I'm aging all the time, which is horrifying. My knees are cracking now. Like when I go down the stairs and stuff, they're like, quack, quack. I can hear all the little like bones or whatever it's awful. So maybe one day I'll have to look into knee pads for my shoots. But in the meantime, other than my knees and my one wrinkle will die. I feel really good. I feel good.
Just love it. I got a few wrinkles on you over here.
I don't know.
Here in the dog land. The first one's the most shocking. And then you're like, oh, well, now he has friends.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Life is too beautiful to worry about wrinkles anyways. We got lots of stuff to do. We got all kinds of.
Exactly. The dogs don't care.
Not at all. They don't even seem to notice. They're all horrified by the wrinkled eye lady.
That's so funny. So I love this. And, I kind of am the same way of just squirrel, where I see so many different things, especially with my hair of the dog stuff. So I'm like, oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do this. Oh, I want to do that. And it's just, sometimes it's hard to focus. And sometimes I think it almost gets a little bit scary because you're like, well, wait, but what if I should focus over here? So when you decided to go all in on dog photography, was it like, oh, am I giving up these things over here? Or was it like totally clear? Like, oh my gosh, well, that's 100% all.
That's a really good question. And that's the thing. That was the first time ever that it wasn't like absolutely terrifying to not necessarily give everything else up, but to say, oh my gosh, I'm going to pick this thing and I'm going to pick this one thing. And normally it was like, oh, no. I got this thing over here and I got like twinkly lights over here and I got like pennies and I get really all over the place. And typically it was like a really heart-wrenching idea to give up. And again, when we say give up, I mean more like sidelining or whatever, because I still like play music and I still, read books like crazy. And I try to do, I have like interests on the side. Although honestly, like I don't feel unfulfilled because my life is like 90% dog photography because it is the most magical thing on planet Earth. Like I never found anything in my entire life that I felt was more like my soulmate than dog photography. I know. Don't tell Sam. Don't tell.
It's our secret, unless he listens to the podcast.
I love Sam.
Send your secrets out.
Yeah, but it was just that I don't know. I felt like, oh my gosh, this is my purpose. Like everybody is here for a reason, and I feel like a lot of people spend their whole lives trying to find that reason. Mm-hmm. And I spent a decent portion of my life, but I mean, in the grand scheme of the world, I'm still pretty young, and I feel really grateful that I did find that at like 24. Yeah, it was like 23, 24, and I was like, okay. I felt at the time really bummed out because I felt like I was really old to have found my passion. You know how like when you look at YouTube videos of like 5-year-old like little girls playing the drums,
she's supposed to do it 5. Yeah, I've wasted 20 years.
You're a prodigy of epic proportions. You're a child. Like you feel like you wish you would have known even sooner. So I remember being in like my early mid 20s and kind of finding this and going, oh, I wish I would have found this sooner, which is a little crazy because I think in the grand scheme of life, when I like look around, I do feel grateful that I have like a decade under my belt, but I still feel like relatively like a spring chicken. Like I I got like time and like years in my bones left to go, you know?
Well, and I think you almost need that little bit of, something to compare it to. Like if you had found your passion at 5, then by the time you get to like 23, you might be like, well, I don't know, is this really it? Or what about these other things I haven't explored? So I think that little bit of quote age, those couple years just give you a little bit of time to compare it to the other things. So then you know when it actually is.
Yeah, I suppose that's true too. It's all about like, there's so many things in life that are about like lining up at the right time. And so much of it has to do with hard work and skill, but a lot of it also has to do with just the universe and timing. And I'm sure you have you read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers?
I have not, actually.
Oh my God, I can't believe it. From the woman of the book wisdom who always shares all the book wisdom. You have to read this book. It is so fascinating. It's about, like successes and outliers, people who kind of stand out from the crowd, names like Bill Gates and famous sports players, and why exactly, like what all lined up besides their skill and their intelligence and their talent, what all lined up for them for this to kind of work out in such an epic, massive way. And so on a smaller scale, I feel like a lot of things lined up like beautifully, and I feel really grateful for that. I was living in Florida for a long time before I started, and then I moved up to Boston and I got a job at Apple, and I was working at Apple, and I was kind of like, I loved the culture because I felt like I could be myself. Like I could have my wacky colored hair that was always changing, and I could be like quirky and kind of weird, and they like embraced that and accepted that. And in most professional situations, they're not really as into that. I think it's getting better these days, but it was like a special place to be, and so I felt good about that. But then I was, basically a glorified salesperson. They call you a specialist there. Makes you feel real fancy, but really you're just like selling computers and consulting with people on like what's wrong with their iPhones and fixing iPhones and whatever. So in the end, I felt like, oh my gosh, I know I have this gift to give to the world. I know I have something inside me. What is it though, and why am I squandering it? Because selling computers isn't what I feel like I was put on this earth to do. And it's not what I worked really hard in college to do. And speaking of, the whole really distractible, can't focus on anything sort of thing. I majored in communication and visual arts, but I minored in biology so I could have that focus on animals. So I could.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I could somehow, use my like creative. I always felt very creative, and like I could, tell a story, or like I could maybe work in marketing or advertising or something, but then also do it for an animal type organization. That was kind of my big thing. So I had this degree, and I knew that I, knew some things about the world, but like I felt like I wasn't using it at all to its fullest potential. So that's when at Apple, I started volunteering at the shelter. And it was just simply because it was like long days at work. Oh my gosh, through the Christmas season. I mean, I'm sure all of you who are listening to this have walked by an Apple store during like a holiday season. And it's
gosh, you walked by an Apple store in like a 3:00 on a February 5th on a Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly right. It's wild, and it's really like chaotic. And unfortunately, as much as like the culture there is great among like the employees and the company itself, there's a lot of negativity that gets thrown around in a retail setting. Just generally, right? You're dealing with the public, like in a retail setting, people are like mad, they want this or they want that. People are more often angry at like the mall than they are happy. You know what I mean? So, and I'm really, really empathetic and really sensitive and kind of wear my heart on my sleeve. And so a lot of times, like after, a bummer interaction at the Apple store, after again, like worked so hard for my degree in college, and I had all these big dreams, and I would like leave there and sit in my car and just cry in the parking lot, because it was like, I know that this is not what I was meant to do. And so with that was what I started to search out my reason. That's why I started to sort of search out my why, which was, okay, why am I here on this planet? What's the thing that from day one has been the thing that's moved me, changed me, brought me more joy than I can ever describe? And that the answer was really simple. It came to me like it smashed me in the face with like crystal clarity in that moment of, sitting there crying in the parking lot. And it was dogs. It's always been dogs. And so that's when I went to the shelter, and I said, well, you know what? At the very least, I can go be with dogs almost as a form of therapy after these horrible long days at work where people are yelling at me about their iPhones or their iPads or whatever. And I went to the shelter, and I just started to volunteer on a totally like regular basis in terms of, cleaning up cages, feeding the dog, walking walking the dogs. Yep. It wasn't photography at all. It was just more like me needing to find the thing that brought me clarity and joy. And maybe in those moments I could breathe and figure out what was next for me. And
did you have a dog at home then?
Well, it's funny. I did own a dog, but I had just, as the timeline goes, as I mentioned, I went to college in Florida and I lived down in Florida. And then I moved up to Boston, and that's where I got the job at Apple. But the reason I moved up to Boston is because I was in a long relationship with my ex-boyfriend of like 9 years. He was like my longest boyfriend before Sam. And we had a dog together. We had a pit bull named Toby.
Yeah.
And he was such a special boy. So when I left, we kind of did this swap-a-roo thing. Like every 6 months we would drive.
Custody of the dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
a lot of people do that.
Yeah, it was crazy. So like when I lived in Boston, I would drive down to like Virginia and meet him halfway, like every 6 months, or sometimes it was every like 3 or 4 months, depending on what we decided.
Right.
So we did this like joint custody thing with Toby. But it was interesting because at the time that I was volunteering at the shelter, which is where I started to get into photography in terms of realizing that these dogs had an incredible story to tell, and nobody was there to help them tell it. Especially at that time. I think it's much more common now for like shelters to have like really great photographers on their team. But then it was a lot of like photos through the bars of a cage taken with a phone, with the flash on, with the demon eye, you know what I mean? Lighting up and the dogs looking like really fearful and uncomfortable. And so I felt like I could do at least with, like whatever difference that I can make with my 2 small hands. That's what I wanted to do, is just to try to tell these stories. And so I just brought like a point and shoot, it wasn't like anything fancy, but that's where I found my answer. Like, I feel like when I pause the universe for a minute to be like, what is it? Because I feel so lost. I finally like left enough silence for the answer to come crawling through the clouds,
Yeah, right.
And you know me, I rarely ever shut up. I rarely ever stop for silence, ever. It drives Sam nuts. He's always like, Kaylee, I cannot get a freaking word in edgewise. Like, stop, breathe for a second, which is probably going to be a problem on this podcast. So just tell me.
No, it's all
shut up.
It's all good.
But so I just, I feel really grateful. And that's kind of like what that book, The Outliers, is about, is like all these things that sort of have to line up. Like I was in Boston, therefore I ended up going to like one of the best shelter systems in the country, which is the MSPCA. And I happened to have beautiful shelter grounds to shoot on, to explore my creativity. Like typically, as you know, from volunteering at places we've been, you and I have volunteered in Costa Rica. Like we've seen all kinds of like conditions and shelters. And typically there's not a lot of space to find beautiful surroundings. It's like you're kind of stuck in like this little play yard that's maybe muddy.
Of times they're like in a city and, there's nothing, just some sidewalks and maybe a grungy, but not in a pretty photography grungy way around.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I just feel like that was really lucky. That was part of the formula, was like, here I was in this place that had these like rolling green hills and old oak trees. And they even had this like graffitied like railway bridge in the back of their property that I could like try out my like funky, colorful stuff with. And so that was like a big part, I think, of like how it all lined up for me. And it was a long time before I realized that, maybe I should pursue this like avenue of, oh, wow, maybe I could. I never thought in a million years it could be a job. I really didn't. But
I was going to say, how did you come to realize that like, oh, wait, there's people that will pay me to do this for their dog?
Yeah. That was, it was never an intention, never in a million years. Like I said, did I think like it could be like, I don't know, a profitable, lose the word profitable, just a business. I just never thought it could be a business in general, and then let alone like a lucrative, successful, busy business, which would come, a few years later. But people would basically, the power of networking, communication, and like social media cannot be overstated. I cannot describe to you and that's another thing. Like social media was just kind of like, it had been around already 10 years ago, but it was really getting like super popular. This was the time where like suddenly all our parents and everybody was starting to get on Facebook and starting to become involved socially for like the first time in history. Like everybody was in one place. And so that, I would post the things I would do at the shelter on social media, and people would start to see my work. And it wasn't great by any means. It was nothing. It was just like straight up, point and shoot. Like I didn't know anything about like great photography or light or anything like that yet. To like make the smallest aside, I did take a couple of photography courses in college. And so they were film. And I had like a nice like 35 mil like film camera. And those were the things that I kind of pulled from that knowledge from the darkroom and contrast and, dodging and burning and all that. Like I kind of pulled from that experience a little bit, but I still didn't know. It was only like 3 courses within my visual arts major because visual art was everything. So I had to do drawing and all this other stuff. And
right.
So photography was just like a small part of it, which by the way, I loved and was totally obsessed with those classes. But at the time I just kept telling myself, well, this is awesome, but I can't imagine that this is a real job,
Yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say with your explosion of social media, like when you first started and because I know you credit that to a lot of your growth was your social media, but the missing kind of magical fairy dust that you always had, I think was the storytelling that you would bring to your posts. Cause it wasn't just like, oh, look, I photographed Fluffy down by the beach. I mean, you would bring in this background in the storytelling and describe the scene and just like bring pure magic to the words, which I think then, we're human beings that are wired to want to tell stories and wanting to listen to stories. So you always brought the story of that dog. So I think that's a lesson for everybody. We have these beautiful images to share, but we need to tell their stories. However we tell our stories, we need to bring the story in.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a really, really good point. And again, I'm super humbled that you kind of like noticed the stories that went along with the photos and that in some way, maybe they affected you or they affected, people who were viewing them and reading these stories in some way. Because it's funny because Sam is my partner, Sam, who's like 50% of dog breath. He's just the quiet half. That's what I always say. I take the photos, but he like helps run the entire business and he's at every shoot, assisting with the dogs, assisting with toys and treats and lighting and dealing with the clients. And so he's a dream, but he's also a professional photographer. And actually he really taught me everything I really know today about photography. And that's another thing, right? That had to line up. Like I met Sam right at that time, right when I started volunteering at the shelter. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing this thing. And I started to volunteer at the shelter. And he's like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And I'm like, I think I'm going to take photos. And he was like, oh, I have it wasn't a great camera. I think it was like a Canon Rebel or something, but he's like, I have like a decently nice camera. You want to borrow it? It was very interesting how it all sort of worked out. But he, in terms of like getting back to the social media and the storytelling and kind of making it work for you and for also the ability to gain attention. And for me, it wasn't the attention for like, again, I didn't think I had a business or wanted a business or that a business was possible. It was more, I wanted to be able to hear these stories about these dogs so we could change their lives because there's, this little black pit bull that I know and love so deeply that's been sitting in the back of its shelter cage for a year and a half. That's what drove me. That's what made me think this is important and I need to pour my whole heart and soul into it. And so that's when, Sam, he was also a photographer and he would take portraits of people and his portraits are beautiful. I mean, at the time, beyond anything I could ever imagine creating. He was so talented and so far beyond my skill level. And I'd look at his work and I would be so fascinated and so he'd post his work and it would be amazing, but it would be, for example, be a photo from like a wedding, of a beautiful photo of a couple like walking off into a sunset or something. And he would say like, congratulations, Caitlin and Dan, like in the like caption. And the thing is like people will like certainly look at it and think, oh, how lovely or whatever. And maybe like it and kind of move on because it's number one, it's two strangers. They don't know the people in the photo. Number two, they don't feel any connection whatsoever to the story of like Dan and Caitlin or whatever, because they don't know who they are. Sam didn't really give them much info. So I started to, when I shared the stories of the dogs from the shelters, it was like photo that I did my very best with, that I tried to go over the top to really pick a beautiful location and nice light and all this and technically expose it well and XYZ. But what really mattered the most was knowing the history of that dog and sharing everything I felt deserved to be shared about that dog. And those stories became quite long, which is why, again, I'm the queen of length and brevity is my daily struggle and every aspect of how my days go. It takes me like literally 45 minutes to an hour to write an email. It's crazy. It's crazy. But anyway, there was no plan in place. It wasn't manufactured. It wasn't because I was trying to manipulate the results of certain photos in any particular way. It was simply just because I wanted to share these stories. And that ended up turning into something that it did become a bit of like a success for me in terms of, well, suddenly there was lots of eyes on these photos because people care. Like you said, we're storytelling humans, or like stories have been passed down since the beginning of time. And that's how we know about ourselves and our families and our cultures. That's, I mean, take it from Disney, you know what I mean? The entire, like the entire legacy of Walt Disney's built on storytelling and fairy tales. And that's what makes us, it just primally resonates with us as human beings. And so again, it wasn't a tactic. I never really thought that consciously about what I was doing. Right. But in the end, when I look back at it, I go, oh, I do realize like why that was effective. Like, oh, I see. Like instead of just sharing, a mediocre photo here and there, because let's face it, at the time, the photos were mediocre. Yeah. I was really pouring my heart into really sharing the truth about every situation and every dog. And the vulnerability of doing that was, I think, just there's a lot of psychology that goes into all of it that I'm really fascinated by. I'm no psychologist, but I am fascinated by it. And I read a lot of books about it. And it's sort of interesting, like how to interact with crowds and how to interact with just generally, like we said, on like Facebook at the time, suddenly all these new people were coming on, and it was people of all ages and religions and creeds and, you know what I mean, different like tastes and likes and dislikes, and how to bring them all together to actually care about something, how to stop them in their noisy newsfeed where they're constantly scrolling through 800,000 pieces of stimuli a day. How do you stop them? So again, didn't know it at the time, but it was quite a successful way to go about it, I guess, in the end.
Yeah. Well, and I think it all comes down to, again, the fact that you found something that you were passionate about and you poured your whole heart and soul into it. And, it's just, you didn't do it. Like you said, you didn't do it for the fame of it. You didn't do it for the exposure of it. You did it because you just felt this calling and this passion to do it, in which I think that is what leads to the most, amazing results, is when we have this need to do these things, and we just, do them as best we can for reasons, just because we want to put it out there, because we want to help the world in some way. And then the success comes afterwards. It just comes back to it.
I think that's exactly what you just said. It's authenticity. It's being genuine about something. And it's not necessarily like trying to build a brand or chase an end goal or an end result. Now, sitting where I sit, I feel so insanely grateful that I have to pinch myself every day, that I wake up and it is my business. It is my income. I've been able to buy, my first home and travel the world and have all these amazing things as a result, kind of on the side financially and like kind of spiritually, and like everything I am is sort of built around this passion of mine. But it did start, and it still is and always will be at the core of everything, a passion that I feel really, really lucky happened to be able to also kind of translate into a job. Yeah. Which is wild.
It's crazy. I know I look back at when I started my business about 2010, about the same time as you, and I look and I'm like, I had no idea where this path was going to take me. Never in a million years did I think I would end up doing what I'm doing now. And I love it every day. And it wasn't even on my radar. So, I mean, it sounds like you were kind of the same way. It's like dogs, photos, tell a story. But could you ever have imagined that, fast forward now, I just held up your 47-pound book behind me. This big, beautiful Dogtography by Kaylee Greer book. Yeah. Do you have any idea that you were going to end up in this? And it's still being developed. We're still moving down this amazing path.
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's crazy. It's wild. I genuinely cannot believe it. And this is getting into some deep, this is some stuff Nicole helps me work through sometimes, you guys. Cause Nicole's my therapist, and I have a deep, a feeling of, what's the word? Not necessarily insignificance, but I'm not worthy. And I think that a lot of artists struggle with imposter syndrome, and they're like, who am I? I'm not, everybody else that you look at. I just gave a webinar the other night and I talked about this a little bit, because this is something that really, really is important to me and resonates with me, to make sure that other people understand. Because when I look at my favorite photographers, when I look at people who I just idolize and feel are absolutely golden gods of photography, and everything they touch turns to gold, and I'll never ever be able to be like them because they were born, underneath the sparkling sun, and I will never be that good because I'm not made of the same DNA and I don't have the same genetics, and I'm just, you know what I mean? I look at Joe McNally Kelly. I look at Jeremy Cowart, Lindsay Adler, Sophie Gamond. There's so many incredible photographers that you look at and you think, man, like you see this curated, like perfect portfolio, and you just think, man, it all comes so easy to them. And I am not good enough, and I'll never be good enough. And I should just put the camera down now. And it's tough these days with like social media is a blessing, a massive blessing, and also a curse because it hurts sometimes to play that like comparison game. Like it can kill your soul. It can kill your art. It can kill your career entirely to just be like, I don't understand, why this person's so perfect and everything they do is so perfect. Or I don't understand why this person's so successful and look at their photos are not even great. It's just like, That's why, like I said earlier in the podcast, like I try to keep my head down. I actually try really hard not to have too many inputs of different types of like media into my head, because I feel like the place where I create artistically is really, really sensitive. And like it's made of paper walls, and anything can blow it down and anything can throw me off course. And as like an artist who feels so deeply, I can get thrown off for an entire week if like something kind of just blows through like sort of my mentality of I'm just sort of looking forward, moving forward, trying to develop myself all the time to be a better storyteller for these dogs that I love so much. Yep. I just have to be careful. Like I try not to get too distracted. And kind of the reason I say all that is because I came from like a pretty like low like socioeconomic background. And as a child, and Nicole helps me through this all the time because she said, you have these bad voices in your head and you're not that child anymore. You've grown up. But I truly believe that I came from nothing. Therefore I am nothing. I'll always be nothing. I'm never going to be able to get through this like ceiling of like, this was placed upon me by kind of the universe or society or whatever. And I'm just the poor kid from up the street that like doesn't have whatever it takes inside me. And I doubt myself all the time. And, as these things are happening, like you said, like holding up this book that I just wrote, which I can't even, it blows my mind so far across the universe when I pick it up and look at it and hold it. And I can't believe I did it. And, getting to be, on TV with Nat Geo and getting to travel the world with you in Charlotte, teaching workshops in castles. It's so wild. And the little kid inside me, I think, is proud, but also that little voice is always there. Like, don't you forget, Kaylee, like where you came from, right. Like you're always going to be trash, and it's terrible. It's a terrible thing. But I think if I explain this to you guys here that like, know that like, I'm always working through that to try to be brave and to kind of punch fear in the face, and walk through that fear and do it anyway, because I think I'll always have that little devil on my shoulder. Like there's only a certain place that people like you can get to in life and you're never going to get past it. So you can try all you want, but you're never going to like proceed past a certain point because that's how you were born. And that's terrible way to think. It's terrible. And I try to check myself every day. I try to check myself often and say like, you're doing great or whatever. And you're moving through it and don't worry about those nasty little voices, that little cloud above your head or whatever. And I am really proud of what I've been able to push through. But I think even, for all of us, something like that somewhere exists inside of us. I mean, unless you're a sociopath and you don't feel feelings at all. 100%.
I was going to say, I think on the feeling scale, I'm more on the Sam side of feelings. Like I'm very logical and
yes.
And every bark I end up being in like a pile of tears at the end. Yeah. I'm like, what are people done to me? But yeah, I'm very logical and it is what it is. But it's the same exact thing. It's the same thing of like, who am I to do this? Who am I to have this business where, to teach other people? Who am I to teach workshops on the craft? Like my brain's a business brain. It takes a long time, to just get over it and tell that voice to shut the hell up.
Yeah, exactly.
And just keep on moving. So yeah, for all of you guys out there that have that voice in your head, which again is all of you, unless you're a sociopath or you're really not listening.
Yeah.
You're in good company. It happens to all of us. And the trick is to keep going and to sometimes to find a friend to help you rewrite that story and look at it from a different perspective. I know a lot of people get really concerned with, oh God, no one's going to pay this. Who am I to ask for this much for my work? And, it's easy to then from the outside to say, no, these people are lining up like excited to pay you. They want to pay you for your work. You're not like making them pay for anything. They're really excited about it. Where us, we can't see that side of it, but you need sometimes somebody else from the outside to look at it and say, smack, smack, smack.
Well, that's exactly what you do for me, Nicole. It's like, I need sometimes, to sit down with you and hear that, because that's one of the most, that's stuck with me more than anything else you've ever said to me, is how excited people are to spend money with me, or with people who make, like amazing, special, once in a lifetime imagery of the thing they love more than anything else on earth is their dog or their cat or whatever, their pets. And it's always stuck with me, because I do, as like the psychology of pricing, as a poor kid, who like my situation in life is different, and it's so weird and wild. And like, I can't believe the things that I've been able to achieve. And I still pinch myself and do this thing where I give myself no credit, like at all, for anything. I'm like, oh, no, it was just luck, or it was, I don't know why they paid me that much for this. I'm not really sure, but it's just really lucky,
amazing.
You know what I mean? Or whatever. That's what I do. I still chalk everything up to like just kind of circumstance and luck or whatever. But you said that to me, and that really stuck with me, because like I said, like growing up, where like the value of $1 was very much like reiterated over and over again, day in and day out. And, we couldn't, buy like fancy, like new clothes or fancy, anything. Yeah. We live in a little tiny house and, whatever. For me to charge what like my parents would spend on like groceries in a year, like for a shoot or whatever, you know what I mean?
You're like, oh my God, this does not compute.
It's very hard for me. It's very, and you tell me this, and Sam tells me this, Kaylee, you're not pricing for yourself. You're not pricing for people who, you're not selling it to yourself.
And you can have the pro bono stuff if you want to do something special for someone in a situation that can't afford what we do. Like, there's still pro bono work, but yeah, you got to get paid too.
Right.
Girlfriend.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, I was in like a couple, it's been a while because the world's been closed for a long time, but I was in the Prudential Center in Boston, which is this like really fancy shopping center, like a fancy mall or whatever. And I don't often spend time in places like that, but I was there for whatever reason. And I was walking by this shop. I cannot remember the designer name, but it was some really fancy clothes designer. And they were selling mostly denim. And it was kind of like just ugly ass, normal, run of the mill denim to me. That's what it looked like, right? But the store was packed. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll just go see what all the fuss is about. So I walk in and I'm like looking around, and I pick up like a pair of like, like mom jeans that just look totally normal, like from the 80s. Like, I guess that's I don't know, man. I pick them up and I'm like, these aren't great. And then I look at the tag and they're $1,400 freaking dollars. $1,400. And I was like, what? And now I do travel the whole world and the country shooting, but mostly my clients are in Boston. I mostly service Boston. So to me, that was like a little slice of life of this Boston area, like, MIT, Harvard grad, like double income, no kids. Like, that's what they love. Hey, they love a nice pair of $1,400 freaking 80s jeans, man. Let them have it. But then
where you go to the thrift shop down the road and get them for $5.
Exactly right. Cut them into jorts. But I suddenly, in that moment, I kind of was like, wow, I really don't feel bad for charging, $3,000 for a for a photo shoot,
Yes, we need to do that sometimes. Just look around at these different prices. I have my one credit card gives me like a $50 twice a year credit at Saks Fifth Avenue, which I never ever go there, except I'm like, I have $50 to spend for free. I should go check it out. I'm like, oh, I can't afford anything here for $50. and I did just find out they have like food and cookies and stuff. I'm like, yes, that's what I will spend that on each time. But sometimes you just need to look at that to be like, whoa. My story of what's quote expensive is different than a lot of other people's. Mm-hmm. And likewise, there's going to be people that no matter what we charge, if we charge $25 for a shoot, someone is going to tell us that is too expensive. Yeah. And, so would you rather work for $25 or $5,000? It's going to be too expensive to somebody, but it's also going to be, okay, for plenty of people too.
Like you said, like the amount of clients that I have that show up that are so thrilled about like the experience and the money. They're excited to give me a check for $6,000 or whatever, just on the shoot day at the location or whatever. I mean, we take payment beforehand now, so it doesn't get like awkward or weird if someone doesn't pay. But you're just like, but they're thrilled. They're not upset about it. They're not mad. No. They like can't wait for the experience. They can't wait for the final photos. They typically rave. You hope you make every client rave about it, and I just can't. I still feel like uncomfortable discussing like that stuff with my family, etc., because they just don't get it. They can't imagine. Like you said. they can't imagine spending $50 on a photo shoot. Like $50, that's $50 whole dollars. Like we could just we could use our iPhones and do it ourselves. Like that's kind of where I come from. And it's out of necessity. God love them. That's out of necessity. My parents did the very best that they could do, for us. And I'm so grateful because they showered me with love and they made me believe that I could do anything. And so because of that love, even if it was, not the most lavish upbringing, it made me have the confidence to stand up and talk to that little nasty voice in my head and say, like, you know what? You're wrong. I'm smack, smack, smack. Like you told me. Smack, smack, smack.
Sit down, boy. Get out of there.
Crazy. Yeah. It's all crazy. Why is there so much like psychology involved in all of this? Let's just photograph dogs and kiss them on the face. Because they're the last things that we can kiss anyways now, since I can't kiss people.
I know. Horses. I can still kiss my horse and my cat who's sitting on my lap right here, but she won't like that. She'll then bite me. She's much more fickle.
I love it. No, don't you have one of your email signatures makes me so happy. I think it's your cat. It's Emma, right?
Yeah.
And it says like, pat me on the butt right here and then I'll bite you or something.
Right. And she's like purrs and scratches.
It's so cute. I love it.
Yes. All of my business emails that come, the automated ones that come out of my business, because I don't want them to pretend to be me because I want my audience or my clients to know that, it was automated, but it's fun because it comes from the cat. So.
Oh my God. I love it. But it's fun.
Yeah. She's my office manager.
That would definitely sell me.
Exactly. And the people that don't see the humor in that, they are not my client.
Well, I wanted to ask you about, because you wrote a book too. Well,
yes.
Look at us sitting here, Nicole, two authors.
I know, two little authors.
Published authors.
That was never on my to-do list.
Isn't that wild? That's crazy. Yeah. So what was the process of writing a book like for you?
Well, mine had a lot less words than yours. Shocking.
It doesn't super surprise me because words are my favorite thing on earth.
I love it. Communications major. That's all you need to know. That's built around words. No, but for my brain, how I do many things, it started with a Trello board. I swear I should be a spokesperson for Trello.
You should.
And then it was just like outlines of what I needed to write. And the nice thing about it is it worked how my brain worked too, is it didn't need to be like these big chapters of a lot of writing. It was like little sections. So it was, we're talking about the shoot and exposure and working with dogs and getting attention. Like I could compartmentalize all the little things. And it was like a picture and a blurb, picture and a blurb, picture and a blurb. So it was just getting the whole flow and figuring out what I needed to talk about and which different areas and writing that all out.
Crazy. But what a feeling though. Like, how did you feel when you actually held it in your hand?
Oh, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Okay. Did you walk into Barnes and Noble and find it? Do you see it there?
I did once.
Whoa,
yeah.
Boy, and it was like, wow. What? I'm going to tell everyone. You're going to run around the store and hold it up.
I know. It's amazing. It's amazing. No, to me though, even more than the book, is when I see something of mine printed really big on something on the wall.
Yeah.
It's just my why. I'm actually in the process for my photography side of my business. I'm taking the whole table and going whoop and rebuilding it. And I'm like, oh yeah.
You fancy.
I'm totally redoing how it's structured. It's not following any rules. I am totally taking all the things. I'm like, why do I like to do this? What do I want to do? How do I want this to look? I don't care what the best practices are. I'm going to test some different things that I think will work. And I'm pretty excited about it.
That's amazing. See, that's the kind of confidence too, that comes with time and focus and exactly kind of who you are as an artist now. And I think over the, at the beginning, it was the same for me. Oh, okay, wait, how do I do this? Are you supposed to price it like this? Are you supposed to make a collection? Right. Are you supposed to? So you kind of look around and you get distracted and you see what other people are doing and you're like, oh, I guess it's supposed to be $295 for a collection that has these three things. You don't really know. So you're just doing the best you can. Yeah. And I never took any workshops or anything. I didn't have any money. I didn't even have my own camera. I was borrowing Sam's. I was so, I hate to say it, but I don't want to say poor because that's,
you were bootstrapping.
But I was I was just, doing the best that I could with my little tiny bank account. And it was, I wasn't doing workshops or I was just doing the best I could with Googling stuff and researching and, and so that's, you kind of feel really alone in this big giant sea, a little tiny fish in a big sea going, well, if I'm gonna grow, forgive my term, my classy lady term, but if I'm going to grow giant balls and try to move through this like part and put myself out there and maybe fail. I guess I got to figure out like how to do it. And so that's when I started to, it was the same, just like, what does everyone else do? And I think when I stopped thinking about what does everyone else do is when like everything changed for me. I don't care what everyone else does. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. And that works on a business level. That works on a craft level. Like, because I think so many people look at whether, looking at someone successful, how they structure their business or looking at what they're shooting. And they're like, well, that must be the key to success. It's not the key to success. The key to the success is that passion of this is why I'm doing this. And this is what works for me. And this is my heart and soul being put out into the world. And you can't copy that because it just doesn't work. So when you actually just start to block out the noise and say, what do I want to do? What do I want to create? Negative space for me. I have a nickname at the Barcas. I'm Negative Space Nicole because all the images I love, I'm like, oh, see the negative space. Yeah. Oh, look, negative space. Yeah.
Little tiny horse in the bottom right corner, big giant sky. That's my favorite.
Yeah, but it's when you start to really just look at creating things from your heart is when the magic starts to happen. And at the very beginning, we do need to look and kind of see what other people are doing just to kind of, because we have no idea. So we maybe start collecting this different information. But the key is to collect this different information and like put it in a big masher and be like, what do I like from all of these different pieces? And start picking out bits and pieces of your own. And then you get to a point where you've now learned how to do these basics. And then you start creating new pieces on your own. And then all of a sudden, it's all built just for you.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think like that's the thing is you want to be not somebody else. You don't want to be like the second version of somebody else, the third version of somebody else. You want to be the first you. And I think that was a really big part in terms of like both of our different paths that we've gone down and our different successes. And I feel, really humbled by the fact that, people will say, oh, I know your work before before I even look at who shot it. I don't look at who posted it. I just see the photo and I go, that's Kaylees. And that's so humbling to me as an artist. That is like the most beautiful compliment because it's so uniquely me. It comes from my soul. It comes from that place deep down inside, from that 5-year-old version of me that would go screaming, flailing, running across the street at every passing dog I would see. And it was like seeing them like kings and queens of their dominion, seeing them like superheroes, like seeing the world as a comic book with colors and flashing lights. And it's always been that way for me. So seeing this very like personal vision of mine, especially the child in me, like coming out in these images, I when I started to find sort of that style, it was like, oh, that's when I stopped giving up doing what other people were doing and looking for what I wanted to say about the world, like my own unique viewpoint. And that's when everything changed. That's when everything really blew up. I mean, I was booking sessions and I was busy before, I really had a very distinct style. But as soon as I really developed who I was and my own unique voice through millions of hours of trial and error and lots of weird dreams and lots of inspiration and watching, lots of movies. I love movies and books and just imagining all kinds of wild things. And it sort of came together eventually. And after that, it was like, okay, this is my thing. And that's when sort of it all really fell together and Dog Breath became busier than I could have ever imagined. And that's the same with you, what you're doing with Terror the Dog. No one's done this before in the pet space. Like you are, I'm not really sure like if anyone's, what else other people are doing in the teaching space, for example, but you're going to come up with this new sort of thing anyway. You're going to come up with this new webinar or this new, program that you have or whatever. And everything you do blows me away. It's so amazing to me because I'm really genuinely super inspired by you, Nicole, because I am the opposite of a business person. I am such a terrible business person. And we know this, right? We've had like this long storied history of Nicole trying to help me through the hard parts because I feel I'm very much the other side of the brain from her. Like she's very practical. She's very logical. She's a really strong thinker. I am very, kind of a dreamer and a fly by the seat of my pants. And I don't really know what's happening tomorrow, but I'm fine with it. And I just want to sing about it. And I'm just going to sing a song about everything. And it's really wonderful to be able to work with you professionally and just be your friend in general, because we really balance each other out in those like
we do.
areas.
We need each other.
Yeah, for real.
Because every time, which, I got to plug our Barkas here for a second, because that came together, I think, as a universal divine timing too, where it was just like, I reached out to you and I'm like, hey, do you want to do something? And we kind of talked about it. And then we were like, I forget if it was you or me. I think it was you, because you had done a workshop with her before.
Yeah.
Like, what about bringing in Charlotte? I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. And then the first time we actually even met each other is when we showed up in Spain. Oh my gosh, almost 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years ago in April. Can't believe it. And like, we all bring something totally different to the table, and it just brings this like magical little thing. And even I leave, like, I go to these and I come home inspired. Like, it feeds my soul going to those too. And it rekindles a passion for shooting, because I tend to get too bogged down and like, because I love the business side of things. So I'm like, oh yeah, more business. I can shoot later. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh wait, I do like shooting too. I want to photograph more.
Well, and oppositely for me, I'm so inspired by the business side, because I think of all these things that I can implement and that I can do. And in terms of like running the business, because, I get so caught up in the art of it that I'm constantly outside at like 2 a.m. trying to photograph the stars of like, my own dogs or whatever. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, not, paying attention to like emailing people and like taking care of invoices and, whatever. And I know that like my productivity is not ideal. And thank God I have Sam, because my productivity when it comes to like the making of the art is like crazy phenomenal. It's always happening all the time. But when it comes to the actual business side, I'm like, oh, he gonna like do taxes. Like, it's just, I am the worst procrastinator. It's like, if it sucks my soul out of my body, like, forget it. I will do everything I can to bury it in the ground and never think about it again. So Sam does our taxes, and he's thank God for him. And he's always, and this is wild. This will make you cringe so hard, because he'll be like, Kaylee, do you know how much we made this year? And I'm like, and I'll like make a guess. And then I don't know. And it's like usually like half or like a third of what actually we did, because I don't really pay that close attention to the number.
You're like, you just tell me when there's things are scheduled and we just show up and we shoot.
And he's like, I can't believe you don't even know this. Let me tell you. And I just don't. I mean, listen, I do not recommend running a business like that. I do not recommend to anyone.
Well, you have your other half in place to run that side of your business. So it's not like you're ignoring it. Somebody else is just in charge of it.
Yeah. But I never did those sheets. Those sheets you're supposed to do where you're like, all right, cost of goods. Like, I got to figure out like how much I'm supposed to charge and how much is my time worth and all that stuff, which we have people do often at the Barkas, because it's incredibly valuable. And I literally never did one of those in my life because they horrify me. So, I mean, listen, if you're like me and you're like really creative and you kind of hate the business side, there is hope for you. Just try to hire someone that can do that stuff. Hire yourself a Nicole or a Sam, and you'll be fine. Just make beautiful art.
Yeah, so we can create some automations and all those beautiful things. Yeah. I love it. So now that we mentioned the Barkas, I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of people like, when's the next one?
I know.
And, we're recording this. It is November, 23rd, 2020. And this goes live December 1st, 2020. So at this point, gosh, we've done...
December 1st is my birthday.
Oh, it is my birthday.
It's so exciting.
Oh, my goodness.
Wait, oh my gosh. Okay, no, you go. I have a thought. I'm putting a note in it. I'm literally writing a note.
Put a note. And then when you guys listen to this podcast, send Kaylee a message on her Instagram and say happy birthday. And she'll be so excited. But yeah, so some of you guys might know we had planned to do Barklander this past May 2020. That obviously didn't pan out. So at this point, it is scheduled for May 2021, but we're still not sure if that's going to work, because we're starting a free Charlotte campaign, because we don't know when people will be able to leave Australia. It's not necessarily looking like it might happen then. So anyway, it's up in the air. It will happen. Our next two Barkas are that, and then we're going to go back to where it all started and do a Barcelona. The exact dates to be determined based on the whole COVID crazy situation and how this all plays out over the next couple of months. But if you guys want to be the first to know of openings, because we will be opening registration again for Scotland when that happens, because with the change of dates, we do have a couple spaces open. Just go to petphotographyretreats.com, put your little email address there, and you will be the first to know when we actually know what's happening.
Crazy. What a wild, weird, crazy, horrible, but amazing, eye-opening, wild thing to live through. I just it's so many things at once. It just blows my mind. It's so strange.
It's
all
crazy.
of it. And it's really, I guess it is what it is, right? Like it's science and these things can happen and it's happened and it's changed everything I ever knew about how the world works. And it's so weird to like my dad, for example, who's, in his like late 70s, like to be like, hey, Dad, have you ever lived through anything like this in your entire life? And he's like, literally never have I experienced anything like this in my lifetime. And it's just, it's really, I don't know. There are no words. I mean, it changed everything. For us, we had so much travel booked. We were supposed to be, when we taught Scotland, Barklander. I was just going to ask you what the name of it is. I forgot.
That one was the hardest one to name too, to date. We had the hardest time naming that one.
We did because guys, try to think of a better name for a Scotland-based. Barca has to be in the name workshop.
And not Barkland.
You get back
that
to
can
me.
Be anywhere.
Yeah, Barkland is literally anywhere. Iceland, you got New Zealand, you got lots of
Ireland, all the
you got
lands.
lots of lands. But I guess that makes sense, right? Land. But yeah, I don't know. It's just we were supposed to be in Scotland we were going to be there for like 40 days because we were going to go to the Isle of Skye and shoot up there and get like Isle of Skye, I think they call it a Skye Terrier, right? Skye Terrier.
Oh yeah.
So go up there and do that, and then we were going to go down to the Cotswolds in England to go to London, and we were going to go to Guernsey, possibly where Craig is from. Craig from photography is from a little island off the south coast, Guernsey. We're going to go there, and then we were going to. We had all these crazy, wild, cool plans, and then we were even going to potentially. This is a bit of personal life information. We were even going to look at some wedding venues in Scotland.
Oh,
yeah, because Sam and I have been engaged for 5 years, anyways now. So it's not very massive priority for me to get married. But I was like, well, you know what? Let's do something weird, and let's look. When we're in Scotland, let's look at like wedding venues. And now that's a whole thing that doesn't even exist. You know what I mean?
Right,
like that whole industry. Like forget it. Like I'm so glad I didn't schedule something. It's all good. I don't care that much. I just want to elope with like 6 people and a whole bunch of dogs.
In someplace really epic.
Yeah, just like a castle or whatever. But yeah.
Just a castle. That's all.
Just a little one. I looked for this. So we stayed in this insane little castle in France, in the south of France, for our workshop in Parc-Jour. And that was amazing. Oh,
that was amazing.
God, it was so incredible. So I was like, you know what, Sam, we're going back to that castle house and let's get married there. Let's just do a little thing with like 20 people. And so I went, Nicole, they changed ownership. So,
I know.
It was like 7 times the amount of money to rent that place than we. Thank God we got in when we did.
I think it's literally like $75,000 a week now. Which is insane. It's like we have to charge so much. There's no way. It was the most amazing house, though. It was owned by the King of France.
There was like an 11th century church in the middle of it, right? Like in the middle of the house. It was so wild. So I thought that would be cool, but yeah, apparently somebody took it over and forget it. We lost every opportunity to ever go back.
That's right. There's so many amazing houses. Yeah, so many. Yeah, life is short with amazing houses. Just we'll keep on going. Yeah, no, I think it's important. Even though part of this year has sucked, like having to cancel Barklander and Barcelona and like a personal trip to Italy. It was supposed to be my year of 3 trips to Europe. Wow. Now it's 0. But there's been good that's come out of it too. It's given us space to do more things, to appreciate different things, to I think all of us, the biggest is to look at our life and be like, am I doing what I really am meant to be doing? Like it's been a great pause for people to really look at, take stock of what they're doing and how they're spending their time and make better decisions that they like, for them, not because it's what the, society tells them that they should be doing or what their parents told them they should be doing growing up, that they can follow what their path.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so easy too for people to get super caught up in the daily grind and the daily routine of kind of, for lack of a better term, like the kind of the daily rat race of like, you get up, you go, you get in traffic, you get to the work, you do the thing, you come home, you're really tired. You don't really want to, like soul search too much because you just want to watch Netflix on the couch and eat dinner and go to bed and do it all again. And then the weekends are like this coveted time of like, okay, I have 2 days to be a human. So let me go hiking or take my dog somewhere or whatever. So people don't really ever take the time to like turn inward and look inside and say like, am I fulfilling? You don't have time to be Kaylee at Apple that one day sitting in the car crying and going, am I fulfilling everything I was meant to do here on Earth. And I think it's been a really massive eye opener for a lot of people. And it's okay if, some people might take stock, like you said, of what they've got going on, and they might go, you know what, I love it, and I'm thrilled, and I'm so content. Great. And there's no problem with that. But other people might realize that there's something in their heart that's been missing for a long time. And now this silence and this relative solitude and quiet has allowed that to come to the surface. And so it's a good time. I think it's a real, it's a double-edged sword, because it is in a way a real blessing for a lot of people to have that breathing room. But it's not great that, people are sick and also dying. Mm-hmm. That's a massive bummer. It would have been nice if it came with something a bit different. But for Sam and I, the awesome thing was that we have a wait list of private clients that has been like ever expanding for years. Right. And it's kind of like something that definitely is a kind of a constant positive, but still like a constant anxiety on my shoulders. Like, oh my God. Like I see all these names coming through and I'm like, how can I ever get to all these? I'm never going to be like home long enough, and I'm never going to be able to. Oh my God.
Here comes Nicole. We'll raise your prices. Yeah. That'll cut some of them off.
I know. And I did like twice now. They've been like, I've kind of I don't want to say cleaned out the list, but I kind of like thinned it out a couple times because of price like hikes. And it still got to the point where we had almost like 200 names on it at the beginning of this year. And we were like, oh my, and that gives me like proper panic attack. Cause I'm like, how can I ever do that many? But this summer, since we were like grounded here, as soon as the world like reopened and we were allowed to like go, back outside and go to parks and stuff, we started, and that would have been like the first week of June, I think, or maybe the very last week of May or something here in Boston. And we shot so much this summer locally. We had the most amazing summer. We were so busy with private clients and everybody was like wonderful. And it was just such a beautiful experience. And so we are finally able to get through like not nearly the whole thing, but like a good chunk of the waiting list for the first time ever. So that was a weird side blessing. It was like, well, you know what? We're grounded. Like, let's make the most of it.
We're grounded.
Yeah, we're grounded in Boston. We got nothing else going on. So let's just shoot. And it made me kind of focus on the beauty of where I live again, because it was like, I'm often looking for these grand epic places that are like some crazy plane ride away and a mountain hike. And I love that. Don't get me wrong. I love that. But it made me kind of largely ignore my local area for many years. So I got to really like rediscover the beauty here and like really find we scouted all these amazing new parks and places in Rhode Island and in New Hampshire and rivers and lakes and oceans. And it was an awesome summer. So we had a really weirdly, a very like busy and also like great successful year for the business. But it's funny too, because we didn't physically get to shoot from February until May. Like the world was shut down. So we were trying to get approved for the mortgage on this house that we just bought, our first home ever. And the mortgage officer was like, well, tell me, how much money did you make from January to May? And I'm like, $0. And of course they didn't like that answer. So they're like, you need to make up your entire year's income in the next few months for us to be able to like consider this. And we were able to do it with our private shoots, like make up the whole entire year. So wow.
I love it.
That's one of those things. It's like when you ask me if I ever thought when I was like a kid realizing that I was not going to amount to much or thinking maybe I wouldn't, would this all work out for me? And could I kind of believe where I stand? And the answer is I genuinely cannot. And speaking of all that, my book comes out tomorrow. It's crazy. So,
is it actual tomorrow or tomorrow when this is released?
So actual tomorrow. So I know, unfortunately,
it will be out.
So it will be out. So here's the thing.
Get it, everyone.
Some people ordered the book, Dogtography, a knock your socks off guide to capturing the best dog photos on earth. It is huge. I can't believe I wrote all the words. I cannot believe it. Huge. Just to call back to something uncomfortable for everyone. It's huge. I spent my entire quarantine. So those months that like, the mortgage guy was like, what were you doing? Making no money. I was like, I was writing a book. So from
for real.
Yeah,
not
for
just
real.
Writing a book,
So from January to like the May, I was just 10-hour days in front of the computer, like blue light migraines every time. It was a lot. And it was definitely something that I felt was absolutely impossible. This is an impossible task. I will try it, but likely I will find that the impossible task remains impossible. And in the end, it's not because it's in my hands. I can't believe it. It sits here in my hands. It was a weird, long, wild like process. It was a lot of like back and forth and copy editing, and then layout was like a whole huge debacle because like laying out the book with all my photos And originally they were all really small in the pages. And I was like, no. You must not know me. We need to do like in your face, full page, full color. Like then the CMYK conversions sucked my soul out of my body. Because you're like, okay, I shoot all these photos in RGB, like color profile, right? Like everyone does. Beautiful, amazing, vibrant, spectacular colors. And then they're like, okay, well, just make sure you convert everything to CMYK, which
you're
is
like, what, excuse me? No, that's how they print.
Oh,
but no.
They're like, by the way, printers only use 4 colors of ink to make all the colors in the rainbow. So you have to do cyan, magenta, yellow, black. And that means that's all they use to make every color in a picture, which takes your photo file and you go, oh, so lovely. And I love it. And it's so nice. And then you change it and you go, all right, CMYK convert, bloop. And then it goes, a giant poop comes out the other side. It's awful. It's like dull and like matted and like dark. And it was really hard for me. So that was a massive process, massive. It was so stressful and just like uncomfortable to go through all that. Right. And then writing like the acknowledgements and all those things that you don't think that hard about when you read someone else's book was the hardest part. Because you're like, I want to like thank all the people I love and the people who made a difference in my life and who lift me up to the stars and support me. And so it was crazy. And now it's real. And now it comes out tomorrow. And it's going to be amazing. So I'm going to go to Barnes & Noble and I'm going to run around screaming with it above my head. I'm going to hold it above my head. I'm going to run through the entire store, all down every single aisle, screaming.
With your mask on.
Don't worry. 2-ply mask. I'll have double mask.
I love it. So where can people go find the book? Because every single dog photographer out there, wannabe dog photographer, or just if you love dogs, go get the book.
Thank you, Nicole. It's wild. Actually, let me tell you something really quick. Okay, when I first turned in the manuscript, they were like, Kaylee, this book is going to be 600 pages long. They're like, plus
I need all the pictures on their own page.
Exactly right. So they're like, we need to take out at least like 2 or 3 chapters. And I was gutted, devastated, disgusted. It felt awful about everything. But in the end, we ended up taking out 2 chapters, which were kind of a little fluffy and extraneous. And it ended up with, I think 14 chapters. And it is, I'd like to say that it covers everything you could ever even remotely consider about the subject of dog photography. I think it's literally everything. I tried. But anyway, let me tell you where you can find it now. Circling back to that original point. You can get it on Amazon.com. Pretty easy. Just search Dogtography. Let me ask you guys a massive favor. This is huge. Apparently, it's a really big deal for the book to get reviews. I guess that's a really big deal on Amazon, like for their algorithm or something. So if you love it, if you read it and you love it, would you leave me a review? That would mean so much to me. If you don't want to give it anything other than 5 stars, don't worry about leaving a review then. I'm not asking you to give me 5 stars, but I'm not asking you to give me 5 stars. No, guys, I'm kidding. I'm not going to twist your arm, but it would really be amazing. It would mean so much to me because the publisher kept like hammering that home to me in all of our meetings. Like, make sure you get reviews. The other thing is Rocky Nook is my publisher. You can order the book directly through Rocky Nook. And I'm not sure if this promo code is going to be active at the time of this podcast release, but just in case, guys, try it. Just in case, try the promo code Dogtography40 if you order it through RockyNook.com, because right now they're running a little like deal of the week on it because it's like a new release. So it might still be there. So you might as well try that. And for whatever reason, if it doesn't work and you feel more comfortable going with Amazon, whatever, either way, you can go RockyNook.com or Amazon and just search Dogtography or just search my name, Kaylee Greer.
Or maybe even your local bookstore.
But yeah, you can also get it at Barnes & Noble or anywhere books are sold. So if you have like a little guy in your town,
they'll order it for you, I'm sure.
It should be there, but they can order it for you. Or you can do, I don't know what other people have, Books A Million. I don't know. Give me some off-brand bookstores. Borders.
I don't know. I don't think Borders is still open anymore. I think they closed.
Okay. So it's just Barnes & Noble, guys.
I love going to bookstore. Just like walk around.
Me too.
Oh,
me too.
Yes.
Anyway,
I love it.
That's wild. It's wild. I can't wait for you guys to see it. I genuinely can't. Like, I'm so bowled over. It's so weird. It's a weird life. It's a weird life.
Crazy. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
Well, where else can everyone find you, Kaylee, to follow your daily adventures?
Follow me on the old grams. Try to find me on the Instagrams, and I'll tell you why, because I keep that really updated. I've been kind of a bad dog when it comes to my Facebook because I've been a little bit separated from Facebook Facebook for the past like COVID year, just because it's been kind of nasty, you know, like the politics and oh boy, everybody's opinions all the time. It's like, it's not great for my like mental state. Like I said to you, it's like a little paper room where I create my magic, and I can't let bad stuff in. So Facebook has been kind of gnarly, but I do update my Facebook. So just in case, it's facebook.com/dogbreathphoto. I forget. Yep, dog breath photo. Just Google it, whatever. All right. And then this is so professional, isn't it? And then Instagram, though, is really where I keep updated. And I try to do stories every day and show you what I'm doing. And I take you behind the scenes on all my shoots. Even if I'm just like sitting at home editing, I'll try to show like, you know, a little edit or something on my stories. Instagram is at dogbreathphotography. And then just go to my website too. Peruse www.dogbreathphoto.com.
Awesome. Kaylee, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I'm sure everyone has really enjoyed hearing from you and just learning about how your magic came to be.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah, just a reminder, you guys all have magic inside you too. So just figure out what it is you love and pour your heart and soul into it. And pretty soon, more magic will appear.
I love it. You're a proper Walt Disney.
Look at me. I did work there for a while.
I love it so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for having me.
Bye. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, go ahead and take a screenshot of this episode on your phone and post it up there on your Instagram stories, and be sure to tag us at Hair of the Dog Academy. And we would just love to see how you're listening. And full disclosure, sometimes we just like to give away a little pet photographer swag in the form of Hair of the Dog t-shirts and sweatshirts. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead and share that screenshot of this episode, and don't forget to tag us at Hair of the Dog Academy. And while you're there, maybe you want to jump on over to our account and see what we're up to on the gram. Would love to connect with you. Thanks for listening to the Hair of the Dog podcast. This was episode number 120. If you want to check out the show notes for access to any of the resources that we mentioned, simply go to www.hairofthedogacademy.com/120.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Hair of the Dog podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please take a minute to leave a review. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. One last thing, if you are ready to dive into more resources, head over to our website at www.hairofthedogacademy.com. Thanks for being a part of this pet photography community.